Well, good morning. I just came from the Senate GOP conference meeting, and I asked them for a chance to speak with them again about the marriage equality bill, something that I strongly believe in and have been doing everything possible to support. I believe that the principles that have guided our nation since its founding, freedom, liberty, equality, the principles that have animated generations of Americans to expand opportunity to an ever-widening circle of our citizenry are the principles that must now lead us forward. If you remember, at our founding, African Americans were held in bondage. Catholics in New York could not hold office. Those without property could not vote. Women could not vote or hold office. And homosexuality, in some places, was a crime punishable by death. One by one, over many long years, the legal prohibitions to freedom and equality were overcome, some on the battlefield, some at the State House, and some in the courthouse. Throughout our history, each and every generation has expanded upon the freedoms won by their parents and grandparents. Each and every generation has removed some of the barriers to full participation in the American dream. And the next great barrier standing before our generation is the prohibition on marriage for same-sex couples. Over the past several weeks, I've met with many Republican senators to talk about marriage equality, and I know how seriously and how rigorously they are all weighting this issue. I was deeply moved by the conversation I recently had with Senator McDonald, who spoke so lovingly about his grandkids and how they had given him new wisdom. And I was just as moved when he and Senator Alisi came out and spoke so forcefully and bluntly about why they will vote in favor of marriage equality. That took real courage, and I thank both of them for it. In all my conversations with senators, Senator Lanza, Senator Flanagan, Senator Grisanti, and many others, I could see how personal this was to them and their families, how carefully they were listening to both their parents and children, and how earnestly they are struggling to find the right answers. This is not an easy issue. I understand there's a lot of pressure on senators from different sides, and a lot of concern about what their constituents will think. This morning I told them, I remember being in their shoes. I wasn't sure what to think on the issue when it first came up years ago. But what ended up really convincing me was something very simple, something that Republicans fight for every single day: keeping government out of areas where it does not belong. I've never fit perfectly into either party, but to me, one of the virtues of the GOP has always been its efforts to promote freedom. Freedom from overregulation by government of markets, of businesses, of schools, and most importantly, of our individual lives. The Republican Party stands for personal liberty and freedom. I see marriage equality as entirely consistent with that, and more of the party supporters and activists see it that way as well. There was an op-ed in the Daily News 2 days ago by Margaret Hoover, a Fox News commentator and the great-granddaughter of Herbert Hoover. She argued that marriage equality is consistent with conservative values because marriage is a force for stability between couples and making them less likely to need government assistance. And I think she's right. Marriage is also a force for stability in families. Gay and lesbian New Yorkers have children, and it doesn't do society any good to prevent their parents from marrying. And marriage is a force for stability in communities, as 50 years of social science research tells us. So for all of those reasons, the Republican Party has always promoted marriage, and rightly so. And for the very same reasons, the conservative case for marriage equality is principled and consistent. And the religious exemption makes clear that religious organizations will continue to be free to practice their faiths as they see fit. I also spoke with senators about how 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, each of us will look back at only a handful of moments that defined our careers in public service. I think this is one of those moments. And I just ask them to follow their hearts and their principles. But that way, no matter how they vote, they will have no regrets. And I still believe if they vote their hearts and principles, New York State will become the next state to adopt marriage equality. because based on my conversation with senators, I believe that if the bill comes to the floor, it will pass. And I'm very hopeful that will be any day now. And I also wanted to commend the governor for being a leader on this issue. Andrew Cuomo specifically said where he stood, and he's fighting to uphold his beliefs.